All right, welcome to episode 2 of the Pickleball Rodeo. My name is John Roberts. I am a pickleball tournament director located in Macon, Georgia. I work with the Macon Pickleball Association as well as the Southern Pickleball Association. We're getting ready to kick off on Wednesday, March 22nd, our 3rd annual PINKEST pickleball party on the planet. It's our signature event of the calendar. This year we've got 350 players. As far north as Buffalo and as far west as Oklahoma coming to Georgia to take part in the tournament. And I'm joined today by Roger White, the program director of the Woodinville Pickleball Club, and Mike Hoxie, the president and founder of Pickleball is Great. And Mike, you just finished up a tournament last weekend. I want to get you to tell us about it to get us started.
Absolutely. So Roger and I just worked this weekend together in Woodinville at their sports club. They do golf, they do tennis, but this weekend in the Dome, it was all about pickleball. So we had 8 courts set up. We went 12 hours for all 3 days to make as many people as happy as possible. Only can fit 200 people on 8 courts. So jokingly told Roger, build more courts, we'll bring more people. It's one of those ongoing searches in the pickleball world, right? How do we find more courts that are dry in the winter? So that's why we were in the Dome. No whispering because your opponents can hear you on the other side. So it was a fun environment, and Roger and I had a great time. Long hours, Roger, but everything ran smooth.
Very smooth. My name is Roger White. I'm the program director here at Woodinville Sports Club. And as Mike mentioned, we focus heavily on tennis, golf, and we really opened things up for pickleball this year. Our club has been historically known as a majority tennis club. And so the transition with tennis players into pickleball and really with new pickleball players has just been enormous. And this weekend was just a kickstart in the right direction. So it was just a fantastic.
The growth of tournament participation is like anything else in the sport of pickleball is exponential lately. You talk about the metrics of growth, 34 million players, and have at least tried the sport, and those projections for the next 5 to 10 years are off the charts as well. And you see that in tournaments as well. When I started playing tournaments 3 years ago, it was 150 was a great tournament turnout, and now if you're under 200, you feel like you left some money on the table. That sort of progression from recreational player to tournament player, I never even, when I started playing, something I want to get y'all's input on is how you started in the game. When I started, tournaments weren't the farthest thing from my mind. I started about 5 years ago, coming off a divorce in my personal life, and was 40 pounds heavier, and realized I needed to get back to sexy town pretty quickly. And years of sedentary married life had domesticated me. And I found pickleball, which was, not just the exercise, but the community of people. It's such a welcoming environment in a way that lots of any competitive environment, there's always a standoffish nature, adversarial component to it. And I'm not saying it doesn't exist in pickleball, but it's certainly blunted compared to a lot of other competitive endeavors. Mike, what's your pickleball origin story?
I started playing a little over 12 years ago here in the Northwest. So I was fortunate enough to start with a lot of the Hall of Famers and really kind of have a great fun start to pickleball. And as our club was formed in 2012, I was the youngest guy in the room, so I became the webmaster. The club did their first tournament. I somehow ended up behind the computer at that. At that time, we were using pickleball tournaments. We did a couple of club tournaments, and then the State Games of Oregon, I helped them modernize from paper and pencil over to pickleball tournaments. And after a couple of years of that, it was encouraged that I create a company to manage tournaments, basically. So I started back in 2016 and did a half dozen tournaments on the side part-time, like a side hustle. I kind of enjoyed it more than my regular corporate job. So I did 12 the next year. And then the following year, I ran out of vacation time. So I had to figure out, do I do pickleball full-time or do I continue in corporate America? So behind me is the Wailea Tennis Club, where in 2018, we held our first tournament on Maui. We have gone back every year, minus that COVID asterisk year. We had 600 people registered this year for Maui. We got rained out 2 days with 200 withdrawals, so that's the reality of life. But we average, last year was 80 tournaments, year before was 65 tournaments. This year we'll likely break 100 now that I have 5 different tournament directors from Texas to California, Arizona, and the Northwest here where we started. So I'll be in Connecticut in 2 weeks. If anyone's out that way, don't be afraid to come find me in this really camouflage t-shirt. I like to make sure that you know where to find the tournament director when you have questions.
Roger, how'd you get started in our fine sport?
I'm just sitting here trying to wonder why I haven't got the invite to Maui yet. I mean, come on, better be coming. That looks amazing. For me, it's a little different. I grew up playing really heavy contact sports, which neither of my boys do now because I learned a lot and beating up my body. And now in my 40s, I realized that getting out and doing some of those things with my kids just isn't even an option. And so when, I never was really much into racket sports growing up either. And so when my 8-year-old and I picked up a pickleball paddle and we started playing, I realized that this is something I could do with my little guy. And really, that's what it comes down to for me and where my passion is. Here at Woodinville Sports Club, we want to be the destination for all Pacific Northwest families and family members to reach their athletic and personal goals in a supportive and respectful environment. Pickleball to me is very unique in that you could be 8 years old or 80 years old, and you can literally either play against each other or on the same team. And that makes pickleball really unique to me, and the way that it's growing is just really exciting. So for me, it was more of just like a fun, something I could do with my kid because, throwing the football with him anymore just doesn't really, it's not like it used to be. But pickleball is great, and we have a lot of fun with it. And I'm seeing the youth movement here at Woodinville Sports Club. And that's really where we're focusing. We want to make this, what I'm hearing a lot from a lot of the population is, hey, we want to play pickleball, but we don't know how to stack our paddle. We hear them scoring, and we have no idea how to do that. And so here at Woodinville Sports Club, our mission is to help the beginner to the intermediate player understand how to play with beginners classes and intermediate classes so that they can start to feel confident to participate in these types of tournaments and really have fun. So
we talked about the growth of the sport, and certainly in my anecdotal experience, I have not met anyone who tries it once and says, that was good, I'm not coming back. It has such a high retention rate, not only retention, but addiction rate, really, in the people who give it a try once you get past, whether people get hung up on the silly name or feeling like it's just smaller tennis. They pretty quickly become disabused of those notions. What else do y'all think draws people in? Like I talked about the community. We had a tournament a couple of weeks ago up in Griffin, Georgia, just south of Atlanta, where we had a terrible rain forecast on Sunday, which was supposed to be men's women's doubles day. So fortunately, we were again at a facility with enough courts. We moved the Sunday schedule to Saturday and followed mixed doubles with it. Ended up being a 16, almost 17-hour day of just play on the courts. We started at 8 a.m., finished a little bit after midnight, and I was telling friends when I got back, don't get me wrong, I was tired at the end of it. It was a long day, but I was also about as relaxed as I can remember being at the end of it. There's just something soothing about being around pickleball that I can't really, I don't know if it's ASMR and just hearing the sound, or the people. But for me, that's what really keeps me coming back. That's what drew me in was I could play for 5 hours and be exhausted, but man, I felt mentally so good at the end of a long session of playing. What do y'all think draws people?
It's demonstrated every weekend, everywhere we go. This last weekend, the story of the weekend was a mother-daughter team that everyone loved watching and cheering for. And it was lots of fun to see how they played together and they played against each other. And that was kind of one of those really nice storylines to really kind of emphasize that, yes, you can play with your mom, your sister, your daughter, uncle. There's a lot of families that come out to the tournaments. As I travel around the West, we see a strong Polynesian families showing up, and it's really multi-generational, everyone playing with everyone else. And it's fun to watch that happen and watch them celebrate together, or help with some of those life lessons of you can't win every match and you have to bounce back to the next one. So it is fun to see the growth of the sport truly in that family environment. It's not just the competitive, ultra athlete that does it. It's everyone can play it.
And the thing that I notice about pickleball that's really unique that I notice is when you're around a basketball game or football or even like golf, anything, it's with pickleball, there was just a sense of togetherness. Like, even though all these folks were competing, they were rooting each other on. The ambiance and the vibe within the dome was just palpable. And I don't know if I've ever seen another sport that can bring such wide, varied age groups together the way that pickleball does. And it's just phenomenal to watch it, which is why we're doubling down on it here at Woodinville Sports Club. The popularity is there. The camaraderie is there. And again, because our mission is to drive that family experience for all the children and everybody else, like, pickleball's perfect for that.
Yeah, the cross-generational piece is also, you're absolutely right about that. It's such a leveler of a sport where 60-year-olds can compete against and be successful against, players 30, 40 years their junior.
Yeah. And the nice thing is that I'm seeing some of the organizations around the country are going after grants because it is recognized as an intergenerational sport. Other organizations are formally recognizing it, that all ages can play together. So grant money is starting to shake free a little bit more for pickleball because it's not just for one age group. There is a strong emphasis on ensuring that there is accessibility for seniors, because active seniors has been proven over and over again that it's a healthier lifestyle. So we're seeing a lot of the adult communities adding more and more pickleball courts because they see they have healthier residents. So it's on all sides of the scale, whether it's intergenerational or the senior living, active living focus. The money is starting to shake free a little bit easier. Washington recently made pickleball the official state sport. And I've seen a dramatic change in the last 6 months with that, because now more municipalities realize, hey, I can't ignore this. Pickleball is not like horseshoes or disc frisbee golf. It's really on the other side of the scale. It's closer to basketball or softball, and it needs the infrastructure to continue to grow and be great.
Yeah, that hits on something that I think a lot of other localities have started to bump into as, sort of the refuge of people who would argue against pickleball's growth, or don't want to see facilities built, or don't want to lose, feel like, and I'm hesitant here because I don't really buy into the territorial turf war between tennis and pickleball. I know that there is that in plenty of localities. I don't think that's a global issue, but the idea that the pickleball courts being built, or even tennis courts being converted to pickleball courts, is a net loss for tennis. These aren't zero-sum games, right? But the argument that I hear increasingly now is that pickleball is a fad. Right? Like the growth projections are the same as racquetball, and pickleball will see the same drop off. And that is the argument used against community investment in greater community investment in pickleball, is that people don't want to build facilities like racquetball did in the early 80s and be left with a boondoggle 5 to 10 years later. Mike, how do you respond to that sort of?
Well, I go back and I ask them questions specifically about whatever they're arguing, whether it's racquetball or another sport, and have they seen the involvement of all the different age groups and all the different cultures that are embracing it. It's not just a small sector and world. And as most facilities I run into start with tennis courts, and like behind me, the 2 courts over my shoulder that were tennis courts are now this year pickleball courts. So they went from 2 courts to now 10 courts. And the tennis, they cannot deny that revenue opportunity versus an empty court. A lot of the municipalities, even Palo Alto is a great story. They have a strong tie-in in their park. Land is very expensive in the Bay Area. It's hard to build new facilities, so you have to utilize what you have. And so even though there's a strong tennis history, there are more pickleball courts being added simply because the popularity in the last 18 months since COVID has really forced it to, you can't ignore it anymore. You have to have a solution for all these people. And it's continuing to grow all over the country. And there's different stages in different communities. There's no doubt that some people are ahead of the other. But at the same time, we're seeing that ongoing growth and the fad aspect of it, that voice is fading because they're seeing it's nowhere close to leveling off, nowhere close to diminishing. It is purely growing as fast as possible right now.
Yeah, I would add to that by saying, it is not. I don't know. When it comes down to it, especially up here in the Pacific Northwest, this is happening. So I would say to those tournament directors and facilities folks out there that might be having these questions in their head, specifically with regards to like tennis and pickleball, that I can speak from experience that this community has embraced this. We are a club that is mainly tennis, and we utilize our tennis courts for pickleball. We do a very stringent scheduling system around this, and we're able to keep everybody happy and make sure that everybody has the courts that they need. So I would just implore those other tournament directors and facilities folks to challenge themselves to meet the needs and demands of both demographics, because I'm telling you from experience, it's very fruitful. You have both tennis happiness as well as pickleball happiness, and I'm starting to see these 2 areas really kind of co-evolve together, which I think maybe we'll do over time. But again, we're able to utilize our tennis courts for pickleball and vice versa. And the other thing up here, for those of you that aren't familiar with the Pacific Northwest in general, pickleball was founded on an island in the Puget Sound, Bainbridge Island. Seattle is the closest metropolitan area to that. And just east of Seattle is what they call the East Side, and that consists of like Bellevue and Redmond and Woodinville. These in Kirkland, these are areas where Amazon and Google, Microsoft, and these companies are on the east side. So Woodinville sits in the middle of that east side of Seattle. So it's really spread beyond. And what we're seeing on the east side is that all of these, not only senior communities, but just communities in general, they're getting themselves pickleball courts in their neighborhood. We get 4 months a year of nice weather in Seattle. So the other 8 to 9 months, they're coming to us and utilizing our facilities. And so it just becomes more of a community neighborhood. So again, we've been doing this for a while now. So I feel like we're very fortunate in that we kind of tripped and fell and got up and dusted off and figured out how to make this work for everybody. But know that this can work for everybody. Just because if you're a tennis club doesn't mean that you can't hold excellent pickleball, not only tournaments, but we also host open play every night of the week, as well as private sessions for these neighborhoods and people and corporate events that want to rent for pickleball as well.
Let me bring us back around to tournaments and drill down a little bit more on that. I worked in college athletics for 25 years and planned and executed conference tournaments for all sports at the Division I level. And one of the, I think, hands down, my favorite thing about running a pickleball tournament as opposed to that is the sense of entitlement among pickleball players is so much less. than any other tournament organization I've ever done.
AAU, volleyball, I mean, you name it, you're right on.
100%. It astounds me every time. And I mean, every punch bowl has its turd or two, right? But for the most part, pickleball tournaments are
unbelievable. Yeah, and John, if I could chime in here, Mike had more 4.5 and 5.0 players at this last tournament this last weekend. And when he was telling me about that, I'm thinking, okay, this is going to get heated. This is going to get, like an AAU tournament or a high level, whatever it is. And it was not. It was definitely competitive. But these competitors, they're going crazy in these matches and people are coming around watching. And then afterwards, they're giving each other hugs. Like it's just such a wonderfully competitive, but not like one person's got to overdo. It's like a very community involvement. So I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I wanted to add to that. I was super surprised in seeing that, especially with the high level of players that we see. And I mentioned to you, Woodinville is about that, really helping all levels of players. So seeing that high level competition this weekend and seeing those 4.5 and 5.0s just crush our durables. I've never seen so many broken balls. Like it was really, really fun to watch. So, and Mike told me before, he's like, you're going to have some broken balls. And I'm thinking to myself, I do open play all week. We do all these little things. And I don't know if I've ever seen a broken ball. Well, I think we had like 30 this weekend. So it was just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Very, very fun.
Yeah, and that brings me to the question I was driving at. So great segue, Roger. What are people, because players are so understanding, participants in tournaments have, in my experience, always been fantastic and graceful. But what are some of the operational challenges in running a tournament that players may not see on the front side of the desk, right? Whether it's making sure you have enough balls because you've got more getting cracked than you thought, or for me it's always t-shirts.
Yeah,
right? Like if I could figure out a tournament gift that players would be happy with that wasn't sized, I would do it into perpetuity, because the shirts are always
so I'll confess that I do not give away free t-shirts. They're now always optional, so you can either save the money if you don't want it, or you can spend it to have the souvenir. But we do shirts maybe half the time. The rest of the time we find functional samples. We had Aetna as part of our sponsor this time. So they brought us water bottles, handy wipes. They brought the food, they brought water. We were fortunate that we had a CBD sponsor as well to give out little samples in case you had any aches and pains after playing for 3 or 4 hours. So there is no silver bullet for tournament swag or giveaway items. It really does fluctuate. I agree with you. There's a lot of under the water surface, as I say. We need to look like a swan going across the lake, but don't worry about our feet hitting the grass or the current. Roger and I are trying to stay ahead of things as they were happening this weekend. The simple things like keeping the restrooms clean, right? It sounds so easy until you're busy with 100 people here asking different questions. Parking, adequate parking and bathrooms are the two probably largest unknown issues for a pickleball tournament. If you are not prepared for both of those, there's a good chance it'll lead to other problems. What do you think, John? Is there any, is that the big two in your world?
Absolutely. Making sure you have, we're really lucky in Macon. We've had 17 dedicated courts for a couple of years. We just finished another expansion. This weekend we'll have 26 dedicated courts. In that whole time, we have not expanded the brick and mortar facility. So the restroom situation remain. It's a 2-seater in the men's room, and
I do a tournament down in Arizona at Robeson Ranch, and I came in a couple of years ago where we had to not allow the players to use the permanent building because of abuse from the previous year. So we brought in portables, and we received significant feedback that was unsatisfactory. So the next year, we found Waste Management to be one of our sponsors, and we got one of the deluxe trailers that had music playing in it. And believe it or not, we got a complaint that the music was too loud. So when you spend the extra money for the premier restrooms, It still doesn't solve everything, but we received a lot more compliments than complaints that year. I try to always get ahead of the curve and get the better restrooms, but we're competing against weddings. So servicing the restrooms daily cost more, but it does help people.
Yeah, especially when they're getting, God forbid, they're in line, they get a text with a court assignment, right? Like, then it's
one of the other side notes that I was going to add, John, is having food available on site. The players don't truly understand the challenges in getting the right kind of food on site. I've been encouraging people in our communications, if you have dietary needs, bring the type of foods you would like. It's hard to service all people at a tournament. It's not quite like a football stadium where we have 13 different concession styles and stands. So Roger and I made an attempt this weekend. We'll revise it for the next weekend. It's a live and learn situation based on the customers and where we get. But my biggest feedback to players is please come prepared. A trail mix of your favorite, whatever, a little bit of jerky to help you get through the day. And by all means, hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. Don't wait until it hurts. Stay ahead of the curve. If you have to cut down your celebration the night before, it will help you be more successful the next day. John's over there shaking his head because we
asking pickleball players to cut down their celebrations it's a big ask, Mike.
Only if you want to win. I just tell them, you just have to reduce it a little bit the night before, just so that you can make it to the end. Because sometimes it's a marathon to get to that gold medal match. So I jokingly tell them on the podium, when they get to bronze, I'm like, well, see, you could have stopped an hour earlier last night and you may have made it to one more match. And most of them understand that it's within their control, but hydration in all seriousness is really important. Even indoors in the dome last weekend, we were drilling down on stay hydrated, stay ahead of the curve. It really does make a difference. We had some jigsaw samples with the pickleball cocktail. Players love it. It tastes like Tang, by the way, if you get the orange flavored one. But one packet is like 2 bananas, and that really helps stay ahead of the curve so you don't have to just eat mustard raw.
Right. I also threw out bananas, cheap bananas. I put a little sign up that said cramp medicine free. It really works. And people ate those up. That was great. The only other, I couldn't agree more about the parking and the bathrooms. Super important. If you can have a separate entrance, that'll make things much easier, like we were able to do this weekend. But the other 2 things I'll add, you hit on it, is, for those of you, I'm sure a lot of tournament directors will be watching this episode thinking, okay, what can I get in front of? Get in front of chairs and garbages as well. Make sure you have enough garbages for everybody. And the chair situation, a lot of folks want to be able to take a load off between matches. And if you don't have enough bleachers or chairs, I would implore you to kind of do what I did. I just grabbed a bunch of plastic ones and brought them in so folks had a place to sit. So just a couple little things to think about to ensure that you set yourself up for success.
And if you're outdoors, over order your tents. Cover as much of that area as you can with shade, because same thing. Everyone's going to want shade, and I have yet to be at a outdoor facility that has adequate shade structures built in.
John, you just have to come.
Sorry about that.
Over to Maui, John, because all these trees are where all the players are hiding in between matches in the shade here on Maui. So don't be afraid to come on out.
Do our best future forecasting as we can, and I'll start with you on this one, Mike. Looking to the future of the sport, obviously there is. If you look in your crystal ball, Mike, if we're having this conversation again on March 21st, 2030, what's happened in pickleball? What's the biggest thing that's going on?
So the biggest challenge right now is how do we keep our roots and our traditions, and how do we evolve at the same time? Obviously, over the last couple of years, ratings has become a giant topic that is not very easy to navigate or figure out. If we can get a little more clarity on ratings, that'll help us drive forward. As you said, it's a bit of a challenge right now to read the tea leaves, because we do have some pretty deep pockets coming into the sport. So my ability to look around the corner or see the crystal ball has been very much complicated and clouded over the last I would say 6 months to a year. And so what I keep reminding people is that if you're going to hold a tournament or an event, make sure you have a core theme or a purpose. If you don't have that, you will just become another option out there. So we're going to see tournaments really start to evolve as far as, are you pickleballing for a purpose? You know, are you focused on a senior tournament like US Senior Pickleball and driving more of a senior focus? I did help AAU Pickleball back during COVID. We ran some tournaments to kind of see about getting AAU Pickleball for the youth focused. So there's a lot of different areas of going forward. The challenge is really going to be, how do we keep it fun? How do we keep it fun for everyone? We're starting to see the team events. I think that'll really help some of the competitive people really feed that competitive drive. The MLP and that sort of team concept, I haven't ventured out into that world yet because I still see the strong need in a traditional pickleball tournament. I do most of mine round robin with a playoff because I know the ratings have a wide variety of where I'm at. So this kind of ensures that we get the right people to the medal matches at the very end of the day, and that way we can ensure that it's fun for everyone. And what's going to happen over the next year is it's going to take a lot of, I would honestly say, patience. Patience equals points in pickleball. We have to keep being agile and adjusting and changing. So what worked 3 years ago may not work in 6 months from now. So keep being flexible, keep following. There's a lot to see online. I really love the Pickleball Rodeo. The last episode was great as a good way to get people started on, where do I find this information? It is a full-time job for me, so I'm constantly following and finding what's going on, whether it's new divisions announced by USA Pickleball, you know, or moving nationals from Indian Wells to Dallas. Those are huge changes that just come out of thin air. So if I talk to the leaders of the world, I would like more transparency so that we're not surprised or hit out of left field with things. There's a lot of sudden changes and movements happening, and it's tough to stay ahead of that curve because sometimes I feel like I'm ducking when I should be jumping, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. I work, like I said, I worked at a Division I conference office for 15 years, and one of the things I learned was the same thing that you said. Our constituents, our members, our member schools would often say the same thing, that this came out of nowhere, and people in the conference office would say, no, we've been working on this for 9 to 12 months. This was an absolute marathon. The announcement because announcements happen in real time, right? But it was a 9. So the biggest thing to me is the transparency you're talking about. Let us know what you're working on, what you're driving. If you don't hit the finish line, that's fine. That's life. For all the announcements we made that people complained about, right? Like there were, for every one of those, there was a half dozen to 10 that announcements never got made because we did 11 months of work and things fell apart, right? And that's why we justified only making the announcement, not keeping people looped in for a while. But eventually we did turn that mindset to say, no, this is what we're working on. This is what we're working toward. And the plan may change, because the plan often does, especially when you are paving a road as you're traveling on it, right? Like you don't know where the curve is going to need to be put in or where you're going to have to turn right, etc. And I don't know what the future of tournaments holds, and the consolidation of power between USA Pickleball and PPA and all of that. I think you're absolutely right. It could look like any of a dozen things in 7 years. What I think is vitally important, and what I hope we see in 7 years, is a lot more institutionalized classes, things like you're doing, Roger, with your beginner and intermediate classes. That sort of programming being institutionalized at the local club level is, to me, what's absolutely vital to sustaining the growth of pickleball. And I hope that's something that we take for granted in 7 years. All right, thanks again. Thank you to Pickleball Rodeo. For Mike Hoxie and Roger White, I'm John Roberts. Play well, everyone. Thanks, guys.